This is Access Tech Live with Stephen Scott and Mark Aflalo. The latest in tech and accessibility every week. Follow us now and get involved at Access Tech Live.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Access Tech Live. Thank you for joining us. I am Stephen Scott. Mark Aflalo is with me as always. How are you doing this week, Mark?
I'm doing better than you sound, Stephen, but we'll get through this one. I'm sure that you're struggling a little bit. I can tell the cold is hitting you a little bit, but we'll get through it.
Absolutely. If my voice gets any deeper, I'll be sued by the estate of Barry White, I think. But you know what? Things are good so far. That's the important thing. Listen, we've got a big show for you today. We're diving into the Canadian government's $2.5 billion that they're allocating to AI. But what does all that mean? You've probably read about it in the headlines. We're going to break all that down for you today with Canadian broadcaster and podcaster Michael Hainsworth. He's going to join us later. Also, tech promised when we were young. Oh, when we were young, remember that? Where is it now? Well, we're going to dive in. Of course, depends how far back you want to go. But before we get into all that, let's kick off with Mark. He has all the latest headlines in tech and accessibility.
Now, Access Tech Live headlines.
To mark Autism Awareness Month, all LEGO stores in Canada and the US will be certified as sensory inclusive. This means that associates will be trained to understand how sensory needs vary and how they can best help neurodivergent children and adults in the store. Pretty cool. They've got sensor bags with noise reduction headphones, fidget tools, and visual cue cards, which will be distributed and available in store as part of the initiative. Good on you, LEGO. Way to help build the awareness, so to speak. Android 15 is out in beta, and lots of people are talking about the new features coming to the Android operating system. One of its latest features is TalkBack support for Braille displays via USB and Bluetooth. Now, the feature, which uses the HID standard, will support a wider range of displays over time and marks the first time that Android has supported these devices directly in the operating system itself. Another feature in the Android 15 beta is audio hints when you go to unlock your phone. So when TalkBack is turned on, you'll receive audio feedback when you register your fingerprint data, which helps with on-screen positioning, placement, and progress. This will make unlocking your phone a guided experience for those who need it. Elon Musk's Neuralink has opened up for Canadian residents expanding outside of the US for the first time. People with medical conditions, including quadriplegia, paraplegia, visual and hearing impairments, or limb differences are invited to register to find out if they qualify for one of Neuralink's clinical trials. It's a big step towards advancing brain-computer interface technology. Those are your headlines for this week, Stephen. Lots of cool stuff going on. We continue through Autism Awareness Month and Neuralink in Canada. I gotta see the kind of people that are gonna line up for this, because you and I have had discussions off air about whether or not you jump in for a clinical trial of that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I would answer to that. What about you?
I think for me, I'd like to say, can someone else go first? Yeah, maybe a couple of people in the queue. You go first. I'll let you go. I've got to say, though, that story about Google is amazing. I mean, it sounds like a very small story in the grand scheme of things, but having the ability to know where to place your finger on the fingerprint sensor, and in particular on those devices that have the fingerprint sensor inside the screen. So you get this on a lot of these new Android devices. It's a brilliant feature. But of course, how do you know if you can't see where the fingerprint sensor is? And it seems strange that this feature was available in the setup process. So it would tell you where to place your finger in the setup, but that was it. As soon as you got your phone set up, as soon as you were using it and you would open up your device in the morning to use it or pick up your device, you didn't get any information about where that fingerprint sensor was. So you have lots of people who actually just didn't use it. They just used the pin instead.
It's hard, Stephen. It's hard enough to place your finger in the right place when you're even just registering it. I can't imagine what it's like to try to unlock the phone when you don't know where to position it. There are some newer phones that actually have those sensors everywhere under the screen, so it makes no difference where you're touching. But those are few and far between. I couldn't even think off the top of my head which ones have that. So yeah, having to pick that one spot where might have some kind of visual cue seems ridiculous. As you said, why they guide you through the setup process makes absolutely no sense to me either.
Okay, let's move on to our question of the day, Mark. Come on, help me out with this one, because I can tell you've come up with this question this week. I just know
it's a group effort. Come on, it's a group effort. If you could teleport to any fictional tech-inspired world, like The Matrix, Star Trek perhaps, maybe Wakanda, which would you choose and why? So let me repeat that again. If you could teleport to any fictional tech-inspired world like The Matrix, Star Trek, or Wakanda, which would you choose and why? I'm not going to hold you to an answer just yet, Stephen, because I want to save it towards the end of the show, but you have to get your mind thinking. There are lots of cool places, and we got a lot of very cool answers. So if you want to get involved, we encourage you to do that. Connect on all our social platforms. You can type it in the chat right now if you're watching live along with us. All social media, it's at Access Tech Live. You can also email us to feedback@accesstechlive.com and get your name and your answer on the show a little bit later on. Stephen, coming up, we're going to dive a bit deeper into some of the stories making headlines this week on Access Tech Live. Stick around.
There's more Access Tech Live to come. Get involved and have your say at Access Tech Live on social media. We'll be right back. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. The show will return in less than a minute. Access Tech Live will be back in 30 seconds.
With me, Stephen Scott, and Mark Aflalo. Now, the Humane AI pin reviews are in, and we've got to talk about that. But, I think we should kick off, Mark, by explaining what this device is, because, there's been a lot of talk about this device in the tech world. So let's get into this. What is the Humane AI pin, and why is everyone so excited about it this week?
Yeah, I don't know if excitement would be the word I'd use these days because the reviews aren't terribly great for it. But to remind you what the pin is itself, it's about a quarter of a smartphone size, and it has a magnet in the back that is designed to stick to your shirt. Or so you have the front part, which has a camera and a touchpad on it, and the back, which is a battery booster, will magnetically connect that to a piece of clothing. So that's what the pin is, and the whole goal is to not kind of replace the smartphone, so to speak, because there's voice activation. There's a LED or like laser display if you hold your hand out in front of it that you can actually use gestures to try and control. And the idea here is that it's connected with its own cell phone connection and can give you an AI assistant wherever you go. That being said, Stephen, I do not remember in my history a product that has come out with so much negativity around its feature set. And I think this is, a lot to do with the fact that there were promises made, and this is one of the first new devices that really showed a lot of interesting promise. I mean, they raised a lot of money. OpenAI was behind it. There's some Microsoft involvement. Lots of capital was raised. I mean, the founders were former Apple designers and engineers. So there's a lot of talk about this. But unfortunately, what we've seen in a lot of the reviews is that it's just not performing the way it should, the speed at which it should, the performance, the answers it's giving. It's just not performing the way it should. And it begs the question I think that you and I should really kind of dive into here a little bit, which is, is a device like this even necessary in the first place? I've got an Apple Watch. There are smartwatches out there. We've got our smartphone with us. I don't think anybody's ditching their smartphone any day, anytime soon. So do we even need to be carrying another device that's dedicated to AI when the devices we have are constantly getting smarter and brighter?
Well, I think we look at this from a different perspective, or we should look at it from a different perspective, right? Because look, you talk about the promises that were made around this device. It's not a device that is intended to be something we stare at or we look at all the time. The whole purpose of the Humane AI pin, and the word humane is important here, is to try and almost give us the opportunity to claw back some of our own time. We're not sitting having to stare at a device. We can interact with the device through the course of a day, but we don't have to focus all of our attention on it. That's kind of what this has been born out of. Of course, it utilizes all of this artificial intelligence in order to achieve that, and we probably wouldn't have that capability without the amount of work that's gone into AI. But it really is a device which is supposed to break us away from technology. So yes, we do have our smartphone, and it should complement that. At least that's my reading of what the promise of this device is. So I'll be intrigued to see how that works in reality. Of course, as you say, though, the reviews, they were not great.
Yeah, no, and you know what? I think at the end of the day, if the power of our other devices that we have on us already, and things like smart glasses do come to light and do get those AI features, which we're seeing. Like, I mean, the Meta frames, the Ray-Ban frames, they have an AI update coming any day now. It's already out in the States. It's going to be out in the rest of the world very soon, and that allows you to use the camera and to query things around the world. And I don't know about you, I've used some of the AI features in terms of just asking it questions, and it's been pretty responsive. I haven't gotten many misinformation from it, but it's been pretty good. But what we're seeing on the demos on the AI pin is that it's just not really performing where it should. That being said, kudos to them for trying to bring something like this to light. And I hope through
Yeah.
software updates and iterations, we're going to see this improve. I'm still super curious to get that on, but I'm also super curious to try, that Rabbit device that we talked from a couple of weeks ago, which has a similar feature set, which the goal here, I think, is to decouple ourselves from our devices that we're staring at constantly, which is interesting. And you brought up another device
Yeah.
called the Pendant, right? From Limitless. What's that one about?
Yeah, this is interesting. So this is a company that's been around for a little while, and the founder of the company has recently been talking about this new device that has been brought out called the Limitless Pin. Now, it's coming out soon. It will be out actually in August. And
Limitless
the purpose
Pendant.
of this device, Limitless Pendant. Yes, let's not confuse the brand. No, you're absolutely right. Limitless Pendant. So this is something which is very similar to the Humane Eye pin in the way that it's designed. This almost snaps shut over the perhaps a pocket of your shirt or maybe in your trousers, wherever you want it to be. And the idea is it just listens to you. As you press the button to activate it, a little light comes on to tell you it's recording. And that's it. It just records what you're hearing or what it's hearing through the course of a day. And then on a web interface that's combined with this, it's giving you an update almost live to what's going on. Now, I tried this not via the Pendant because it's not out yet, it's out in August, but via the web interface, which is available now. And it was very interesting talking with my good friend Sean Priest over on Double Tap. We were just, before going on air, we were just talking and we said, let's hit record on this thing. Let's actually start it recording and see what it does. And we made the point, hey, let's set up a meeting and talk about tomatoes at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. And as we were talking, it was creating a calendar event and saying, hey, do you want to add this to your calendar?
Oh, really?
It was incredible. Yeah, and I think this is where I feel perhaps the Humane AI pin is kind of future gazing, whereas something like this is very much of the moment. This is something that can be achieved now and can actually work now. And I think this will perhaps be more interesting from a price point of view. The marketing on this is absolutely brilliant. They did a whole show of the marketing at $699 US, and then said, actually, that doesn't look right. Let's drop the 6 and make it 99. And the reason they did that, of course, is because the price of the Humane AI pin is $699 US. So $99 for this. It comes out in August, but it's not the Humane AI pin. It's different. It doesn't have a camera in it. It is pretty much only for audio recording.
Passive, right? It's a more passive device, right? So
exactly.
I want to describe it
to complement your life.
But it looks like two AirTags kind of back to back with a little rubber kind of bridge over the two that can snap on anything, and the multiple colors available, which kind of cool. But it's a passive device, so it's if you want to, it can be just listening in on the conversation and basically just giving a note of your life. I'm curious if you can run this all day long and just have it just annotate your entire life when you get home, saying, "What did I say today to my wife? What did she tell me that I forgot?" And I can go back.
And
This
that's
should be
it. That's
really useful for me,
that's
Stephen.
exactly what this is about. It's about that purpose. It's about almost not transcribing your life, although it is doing that in the background, but it's giving you actions, it's giving you summaries, it's giving you notes as you go along. And I think that is something that will become more useful as AI progresses into our lives.
It's funny because we talked about the AI pin, and earlier this week, the one of the first reviews that came out was a YouTuber that we're both fond of, Marquez Brownlee. He goes by
Yeah.
MKBHD, of course, on all social media, and his review wasn't a great review. It wasn't a harsh review by any means. I mean, he definitely, just like we were talking about the positivity of it and the potential of it, and the fact that it takes kahunas to actually come out with a product these days. A very honest review, something that I think, and I've watched him for a very long time, I think that nothing has changed in terms of the style of his reviews. But there was an immediate backlash by his community and just community in general, even other tech reviewers saying that, is it fair for him with an 18 million, subscriber following on YouTube around the world to bash a product like that? And the reason they brought it up was because the last product that he kind of gave such a harsh review to was a car called the Fisker Ocean, an electric car that was, struggling to begin with. And he gave a bad review. And within almost days of them even putting out that review, the company filed for bankruptcy. So people are putting two and two together, probably where they don't exist. But it got so far, Stephen, to the point that he had to put out a video a couple days later saying, "What's the role of a reviewer here? I'm just doing my job. I'm giving you a impartial view of this product that was sent to me to review. I make no promises in being positive or negative about it. I'm going to give you my honest opinion." But people are holding him to the account, saying, "Well, you should have more responsibility because you have 18 million followers." What's your take on that? Because I think as a tech reviewer, someone who gets their hands on products, yeah, I try not to look for the bad in things, but if they promise A and I get D, E, F, I'm not going to lie about it because I want to make the company happy. If they don't want to send me a product because I didn't, review it the way they want, then don't send it to me. I'm going to go buy it myself and review it. What's your take on this?
Well, look, I often think about the Oprah effect, right? Which is the opposite way around, where Oprah would talk about a product and then millions of people would contact companies and almost, saturate the company's capability to actually respond to the amount of orders they were getting. No one complained then. And I think the same rule applies with reviews and this kind of technology in this world. Look, I think it's important to be honest because you have to be honest with these reviews. I think if there's an issue or something that comes up as a result of the review that perhaps is inaccurate, then that should be dealt with. But no one's coming back and saying anything he said is inaccurate. That's the key point here. No one said that. What they're saying is he shouldn't have come out with such a nasty review, which it wasn't a nasty review at all. In fact, I would say he broke the review down very well. You should go check it out on YouTube if you haven't already. And, he has form on this. He's done this before. He always tries to come at this from a fair perspective. And I think you have to do that. You have to be honest with your audience because at the end of the day, people are coming to you for advice. People come to us for advice. And when we talk about products, we have to be honest. There are reasons sometimes we'll pick up and say, this is a great product. This is, less of a good product. And I think it's important that we are able to say that. Otherwise, we just become the PR for these companies. And I'm not up for that.
One of the opening statements of his kind of rebuttal video when he came out with it, and the fact that he had to do that was just ridiculous too, was basically said if a product fails, is it the responsibility of the person who created the product or the person reviewing the product? And I think people have to really go back to the granular for something like this and remember that, take reviews aside, you put out a bad product and it's a bad product. There's no way of hiding that. There's no way of sugarcoating that, which is interesting. And it all got my mind thinking about just the whole lawsuit against Apple and then going back to the lawsuit against Microsoft back in the 90s about almost penalizing people for success. He has 18 million followers. Good on him. Does that give him more responsibility? People have the choice to follow him. They didn't, he's not, yes,
Yeah.
he benefits from it and he he makes money from it and he's turned it into an enterprise. Same way Apple, they've become a very successful company. Or are they using anti-competitive behavior? That's up for debate and let the courts decide that. But I feel like, people constantly want to penalize people who are successful. And I don't know if
I
that's a
feel,
jealousy effect. I'm sure this.
yeah, I mean, I do feel sometimes though there's we're at an interesting place with technology where I feel we don't have the patience or the tolerance for a new category to emerge, for a new product to emerge. Almost if it doesn't come out of the gate 100%, then it's just not right and we shouldn't bother with it. And I'm conscious of that as well. And that's something we need to think about. I'm sure the reviews, and in fact, I remember a lot of the reviews of the original iPhone were not great. But we didn't have much else to compare it to. There wasn't much else out at that time. And it did seem to exceed in a lot of other areas. Whereas nowadays we look at every other device we own, which seems to be far more capable than something like this. But the point here is that this is not a product to replace. This is a product to complement. And I think that's where perhaps people might be missing the point of what this device is for. I don't think this will be the first product to come out like this. It certainly won't be the last. It is going to be a very interesting category to emerge. And of course, in 5 years, maybe even a year's time, we'll see very different results. And we'll all be forgetting this conversation and actually looking at how wonderful, oh, look how wonderful my PIN device is and how great it is, because we've realized the value of it.
You mentioned something interesting there, which is patience. And I think you're dead on is that we've lost the patience, which I think why companies like Apple actually wait and they don't necessarily run out of the gate and try to compete right away, because they'd rather come out with something a little bit more refined. Stephen, a question of the day: if you can teleport to any fictional tech-inspired world like the Matrix, Star Trek, or Wakanda, which would you choose and why? I'm going to hold you to an answer towards the end of the show. So if you guys want to get involved, don't forget you can do that now on the YouTube chat. You can connect with us on all our social media, feedback at accesstechlive.com, and of course, get involved. When we return from a short break, the Canadian government is dedicating billions of dollars to AI in Canada. But what does that really mean? Michael Hainsworth joins us to break it all down after a quick break here on Access Tech Live.
There's more Access Tech Live to come. Get involved and have your say at Access Tech Live on social media. We'll be right back. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. The show will return in less than a minute. Access Tech Live will be back in 30 seconds. Access Tech Live, Stephen Scott and Mark Aflalo with you today. Now, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recently announced that it's setting aside $2.4 billion in its upcoming budget to build capacity in artificial intelligence. Now, that is a lot of money and brings with it a lot of questions. So let's try and get some answers.
Yeah, let's try to do that indeed, Stephen. Michael Hainsworth is a name you might recognize from his years of work on television, including Canada's Business News Network, CTV Evening News. He's the host of the web series Where's My Jetpack, which we're definitely going to get into. Has been covering the business of tech for over 30 years. Michael, thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm going to give you a quote, okay? We want to help companies adopt AI in a way that'll have a positive impact for everyone. What does that mean? That seems so vague.
It's deliberately vague because, quite frankly, we really don't know what AI is and isn't at this point. It's the early stages in the game. The analogy that I was giving the other day was, you remember back in the 1990s when Photoshop became a thing for the first time? And you could always tell when a graphic designer got a new plugin to enhance the functionality of Photoshop, because suddenly, out of nowhere, every graphic designer was adding page curls to every corner, grime over every image, and flaming text across every graphic that they had ever produced, all because this little plugin would make that possible. And then we would sort of step back and realize we didn't need page curls on every image. We didn't need grime over every photo. And so maybe we need to get a better handle on what plugins we are and are not using in Photoshop. AI is sort of at the same stage. We're trying to figure out what this does well, what it does not do well, and how we can make it be ultimately a tool for good. And this money is going to help sort of get us down that path because, quite frankly, Canadians punch above their weight in the world of artificial intelligence. There are four key godfathers of artificial intelligence. At Boston's MIT, you've got Sandy Pentland. You've got in Ottawa, three actually primary, three. And in Ottawa, you've got Joshua Bengio. And in Toronto, at the University of Toronto, you've got Jeffrey Hinton. Those three players are the key. And Canada is home to two of those three players within the AI space. So what we're trying to do here is throw a lot of money at this problem, try to figure out what solutions it's perfect for, and at the same time, trying to avoid the harm that comes with experimenting wildly with this type of technology.
You mentioned those three godfathers, and Canada's always been rich in talent, especially in the tech sector. There's no questions about that. And I think we're trying to make sure that those people don't go elsewhere and develop this kind of technology. Do you think we have the wherewithal to use this money wisely and actually make us stand out in the global sphere when it comes to AI?
I do, because 20 years ago, we threw a ton of money at artificial intelligence, and look where it's landed us today. 2 decades later, Canada is a leader. We punch above our weight when it comes to artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms, and all of that that goes in between. Just the U of T, Jeffrey Hinton, his work there has led to a remarkable collection of former students going off into the world and launching their own startups. The incubation that is happening in Toronto, in Montreal, in Vancouver is absolutely remarkable compared to what you're getting elsewhere in the world. The bigger question comes down to how do we provide a leadership role as Canadians on the world stage? We've got the reputation already. We need to take advantage of it. Some of that money will help with that. Some of that money will help attract talent. The thing is, tech bros have a huge aversion to taxes. I got a brother who's a tech bro. He's living in California right now. He will not come back to Canada, even though we've got a social safety net that he and his family very much needs. We've got an education system that rivals the world for his young children who are growing up. But for him and for every other tech person I talk to, the tax situation in this country is what keeps them from either coming back to Canada, or it keeps foreigners from coming into Canada. And the latest budget, while it earmarks $50 million over 5 years for the AI Safety Institute of Canada, $5 million between 2025 and 2026 for the AI and Data Commissioner Office, as well as other monies for this type of technology. The idea that we're going to increase the amount of money you have to give to the government when you have a win in the stock market, that capital gains tax that was included, is going to push a lot of those people away. I'm not arguing that it's money that should not be taken. If you're doing really well, you ought to be contributing to society. And so there's going to be a bit of a push-pull scenario that comes out of this. The money specifically for AI is good, but some of the other incentives that we have in this country have proven to be disincentives to trying to attract new talent. And that is going to be the balancing act that this money is going to have to play once it gets into the hands of the people who are going to be using it.
Yeah, it's not just the tech bros that are going to be unhappy, is it? I mean, some other party leaders are saying that Trudeau is out of control in this spending. Is $2.5 billion too much?
No, it's not too much. It's not too much at all. As a matter of fact, that 2.5 billion bucks will disappear quite quickly thanks to the incubation nature of Canada's ecosystem. The thing is that some of that money needs to be earmarked for taking companies to the next level. Canadians are very good at creating startups. Canadians are very good at creating technology startups. But what Canadians lack is the ability to scale those startups on the global stage. So often what we find is Canadians will come up with really great new ideas, and then they end up getting bought out by the Googles of the world, the Apples of the world. And depending on how good the technology is, they get captured to be killed as opposed to captured to be grown. And that is a risk that we need to address, because if we don't, then we're going to be throwing all of this money into creating new innovations in AI that American companies and European companies are just going to take over. And at the end of the day, it's not going to benefit Canada in the long run.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. I want to backtrack for a quick second because we talked about 50 million being earmarked towards the safety element of things. In the grand scheme of things, you look at 50 million versus 2.5 billion. Is that enough on that side of things to make sure that this doesn't go in a bad way?
Yeah, it's 10 million bucks each year for the next 5 years. That creates the AI Safety Institute of Canada to ensure the safe development and deployment of AI. I think it's a little early to know whether or not 10 million bucks is going to be enough, but I've got an itchy feeling that it isn't. AI is a huge benefit to society, or can be, but it can also be a huge problem. It's a metaphorical double-edged sword. It will help create jobs, it'll enhance creativity, it will build democracy, but it's also a threat to jobs, creativity, and democracy. And we need to ensure that that money particularly works its way backwards on my list. We need to start with democracy. We've seen perfect examples in the United States of Russian propaganda systems that leverage artificial intelligence to flood social media with disinformation, with misinformation, pitting people against each other. And, the Elon Musk bot problem didn't go away. It got worse, much, much worse. And so much of that is fueled by algorithms. And if we don't come up with some sort of system to circumvent Russian and Chinese disinformation campaigns in Canadian democracy, we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we don't really know who we're voting for. We're arguing amongst ourselves as opposed to working lockstep to sort of move the country forward in a positive way. And if we don't address those issues as part of that situation, we're in big trouble. But the other issue that doesn't get a lot of attention is the security aspect, not the security to democracy and whether we're getting disinformation, but the actual security. When you've got a large corporation, I'm going to give Amazon as an example, not that I have this as a specific use case example, but could you imagine if the algorithm that Amazon uses to determine what you see on the screen has been hijacked by a bad actor? By example, maybe this bad actor doesn't want Canadian companies to sell Canadian products on Amazon. And so they've snuck into the Amazon algorithm, and they have altered it in a manner that Amazon is completely unaware of. So that now when you do searches, Canadian products don't come up. American products come up, maybe Russian products come up, Chinese products come up, but not Canadian products. And so whether that be an Amazon, whether that be any other major corporation in this country, it could be a bank for all we know, that has found their algorithms been attacked. They don't know it, and they don't know that what it's outputting is false data. This is a thing that chief security officers are talking to me about on a regular basis as a bigger threat than ransomware, a bigger threat than identification theft, because they're going to be changing the output on algorithms, and we might not even know it.
It is terrifying when you put it in those words, but I think there's another element to this conversation that we need to have, and that is, great that, of course, the Canadian government want to pour money into innovation, but there has to be regulation as well. Where does Canada stand on that front at the moment, regulating what is becoming AI, what is going to be created?
I'm a little nervous about that, to be quite frank. And it stems not so much from Canada as it does the United States. You recall when Mark Zuckerberg had to go up to Capitol Hill and answer questions to Congress about how Facebook works. And these octogenarians who probably, because I know from personal experience, are still getting their assistants to print out their email messages so that they can dictate replies. These are the people in the United States who are making legislative decisions about how to regulate things like social media. They don't understand how it works. They don't understand any of this. Canada is, to a degree, in the same boat. We've got politicians who don't fully understand their file, and we also have American-style politics coming into play, where one side is focused on culture wars, while the other side is very earnestly trying to get a job done, and they don't understand the rules of politics have changed. And so you're going to get disinformation, misinformation in that process as we try to come up with legislative rules that make a lot of sense. And the perfect example of it was when Canada tried to legislate social media for the news industry. The solution was, hey, if Facebook and Google are adding links to all of our journalistic product that gets them advertising dollars, why should the news organizations not get some of that advertising money? They put together a bill that became law that led to Canadians not being able to see news on their social media as a result of that. And it was a very ham-fisted approach that people within the industry were saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is how you fix it. And they ignored it all. So I'm really nervous about the ability for politicians to determine what good legislation looks like. The flip side of that is that you can't leave it up to the tech bros either. We saw what happened over at OpenAI with Sam Altman. OpenAI was originally designed to be an altruistic organization that was not profit-driven. They weren't going to make decisions based upon money. And then at the end of the day, that's exactly what happened.
You bring up a really interesting point with the social media, because that brings me to my next question for you, which is how do casual consumers, everyday people, how are we going to be affected by all this money being spent on AI? Are we going to feel anything other than the political conversation and other companies, benefiting from grants and various elements like that?
I feel like, we should just roll a clip from the scene of The Graduate. Get into plastics, son. There's a variation on that for the 21st century. Get into AI, son. So a lot of that money is going to trickle down into the education system. It's going to drive young Canadians to get into the industry, this nascent industry that will be so ubiquitous in the next 5 to 10 years that you really need people who are capable and competent of doing this. The perfect example is I talked to a chief technology officer at a major Canadian company whose name I'm not permitted to discuss because we were under Chatham House rules in the meeting. But they just hired a prompt engineer for $300,000. That's the job you want your kid to have.
Wow. Okay. Prompt engineer. I'm going to look that up right now. But no, it's you make a really good point. And playing with AI and crafting the right prompts really does change the outcome. Michael, thank you for breaking this down with us. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I gotta dive into some of the things that you're doing because it's super interesting. We want to take advantage of you being here, and obviously look to the future and look a little bit the past. So stick around. When we come back, Michael Hainsworth will be with us right here on Access Tech Live.
There's more Access Tech Live to come. Get involved and have your say at Access Tech Live on social media. We'll be right back. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. The show will return in less than a minute. Access Tech Live will be back in 30 seconds.
And we're back on Access Tech Live. I am Stephen Scott. He is Mark Aflalo.
And we're joined by Michael Hainsworth. Michael, I gotta dive into some of the stuff that you're doing. Where's My Jetpack is a web series that has an incredible motto, which is the technology we were promised, what we're actually got, and what's coming next. Tell me about the series and how this all came to be, because it's a super interesting premise.
It was weird because my speakers bureau decided to label me a futurist, and any journalist worth their salt will roll their eyes at the idea of being called a futurist. But they're like, no, people love this. Lean into it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to lean into this because as a kid, I was always fascinated by this. You know, you talk about the Jetsons was perhaps my earliest example of that. You know, we were promised robot butlers, courtesy of shows like the Jetsons and all of that, you know, 1950s, 60s jet age type stuff. We were promised flying cars. We were promised food in pill form. And I know we don't want to get into it, but that's the only one I'm genuinely disappointed we didn't get. But I'm fascinated by the idea that there's a future that we don't know. We can only guess as to what it is. You look at predictions from 1901 about what 2001 will look like, and they all assumed we'd be using inflatable balloons to walk on water because the inflatable balloon was a new concept to them. So I'm always really curious about how we think about the future based upon what we know in the present and just how wrong it often is. So that was sort of the idea behind Where's My Jetpack? Where is it? I was promised one. I didn't get one. And every time someone will send me a video of some guy with a jetpack, and I'm like, that's not the jetpack, and you damn well know it. I'm looking for a Rocketeer jetpack. That's the real, this thing with it's attached to your arms, and you use that for the thrust and all that. That's not a jetpack. Come on.
Is there anything particular, technologically speaking, or if you look back, that, you know, knowing what you know today, knowing what was being developed today, that you look at and say, this should be here now? What is the holdup on this?
I would say flying cars would be a perfect example of that. But the reality is that you don't want a flying car today. And the reason why you don't want a flying car today and why we don't have them is they're incredibly dangerous. And, you know, you've been stuck behind a guy on the highway who's got his left blinker going on perma-blink for the last, 6 or 7 miles. You can't trust that person with a flying car because they haven't even figured out the XY axis, let alone a Z axis. So a flying car will come, but that flying car is going to have to be autonomous. And before we can do autonomous flying cars, we need to sort of figure out the autonomous regular car thing. And, whether or not you want to argue that Elon Musk has figured that out, to which I would strongly suggest he has not, we're not going to see flying cars until we figure out the XY axis. Ironically, most planes that we've been on in the last 10 to 20 years have been self-flying planes as well. The pilots exist for when there's a problem, not to get the plane up or down. So we're kind of already there, but we have this one problem that is preventing us from getting to that level, and that's compute power. A lot of the compute power that's going to be necessary for autonomous vehicles isn't necessarily going to be on the vehicle itself. It's going to be in the cloud, on edge clouds, cloud devices, servers that are basically where the transmitter tower is. And they're distributed so that as you move along the road or you fly along the sky, that they will bounce from tower to tower and hand off the brains of the operation to that physical machine, whether it be a car or a plane. That is coming through 5G and 6G. 5G and 6G wireless technologies have such a low latency between the point at which you ask for information and you get it back to the vehicle or vice versa, that it will allow us to provide virtually real-time reactions to things. So that's kind of next. So I still think things like flying cars are coming. Maybe we should have had them already if we had put the effort into it by now, but it's one of those things that I'm keeping an eye on.
You know, it's always interesting when you talk about innovation. I think here on Access Tech Live, of course, our show is all about innovation, but also the intersectionality of disability and technology. And I think that personally, my experience is that disabled people are often at the forefront of a lot of innovation, perhaps don't realize it, but we are because of our needs, because of whatever it is that we require. And oftentimes, innovations that come as a result of disability actually enable everybody. They work in the mainstream. I think about, you know, electronic sliding doors or the electric toothbrush, for example, all devices that were built for accessibility purposes but became mainstream. Do you find that?
100%. This device that I'm holding in my hand, the Apple iPhone 15 Pro, would not be possible if it wasn't for the advances that were expressly designed for the disabled community. And I'm talking about Siri as a perfect example. Speech to text, text to speech. These were originally enabling technologies for those who could not either speak or hear. Those are the types of technologies that we're talking about. Touch screen technologies were originally developed because some people can't type and all they can do is point, and that's what we need to help them with. I had a very interesting conversation about this with the legendary science fiction author Cory Doctorow, sitting in his Burbank, California living room, and him pointing out that, Michael, at some point, every single one of us will be disabled to one degree or another. I spent 11 years in radio, my hearing's going. So speech to text, that's going to be helpful. Text to speech, that's going to be helpful. But closed captioning, that will be revolutionary for me as I'm watching Netflix in my old age. But it's other aspects as well. Maybe mobility issues will come to play. And we see devices that were originally meant for that, like the Segway scooter is a perfect example of that. The creation of the Segway was preceded by the creation of essentially a wheelchair that allowed you to go up and down stairs, that allowed the user to be elevated to the same height as someone who was standing in front of them. That technology got added to the Segway scooter, which the rest of us kind of rolled our eyes at. We didn't think we needed something like that. But now your kid's got a hoverboard. If it wasn't for the Segway vehicles that came before it, your kid wouldn't have fun with one of those wacky Back to the Future style hoverboard devices because of the necessary components. So this is the type of thing where we have to step back and realize that while a lot of this technology is fun for those who are walking freely day to day and feel that they've got not a care in the world, a lot of the technologies that we're using on a day-to-day basis are expressly because they were first designed for those who had specific disabilities.
You know, I'd argue that the hoverboard, by the way, still isn't the hoverboard they promised us in the future. But that's a story for another day entirely. I don't know if you paid attention, but the question of the day today, I think, ties in perfectly. And I got to ask it to you before we let you go, which is, if you could teleport to any fictional tech-inspired world, like The Matrix, Star Trek, Wakanda, what would it be and why?
All right, so then I have a question for you. When you say, teleport to this tech-inspired world, do I have to stay there? Can I come back to the present day where we are right now?
You can come back. Yeah, you can come back for sure. It's just a short visit, or as long as you want.
So then the short visit would be Star Wars, that universe.
Okay.
But if I was stranded permanently in a tech-inspired alternate fictional universe, it'd have to be Star Trek. I love Star Wars for the grit and the grime and that real lived-in feel, but Star Trek is that utopian vision that we kind of all want. They don't have money. They don't have the problems that we have of the present day. And if I had to stay in a fictional future, I think I would like Star Trek, with only one exception. I would never in a million years allow them to teleport me anywhere, because I don't know how you feel about it, but as far as I'm concerned, the Star Trek teleport device, that's a suicide machine. We're going to dismantle you, take you apart and put you somewhere else and put you back together. Yeah, you'll put a version of me back together, but me, myself, I'm going to fade to black and I'm never going to wake up again. So I'm with Bones on this. Dr. McCoy doesn't believe in teleporters. Neither do I.
Michael Hainsworth, if people want to follow you, check out your web seekers, where can they do that?
I am on all the major social media platforms as Hainsworth TV. I'm on the Threads, which I'm trying to build up because I'm not a big fan of Elon Musk's Nazi bar. I'm also on LinkedIn if you want to talk about something on a professional basis as well.
Michael Hainsworth, thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to have you back on again. Coming up, we're going to wrap things up. Sorry, go ahead. Coming up, we're going to wrap things up with the answers to your answers to the question of the day. Michael, thank you for being with us. We'll be back in a moment here on Access Tech Live.
There's more Access Tech Live to come. Get involved and have your say at Access Tech Live on social media. We'll be right back. There's more Access Tech Live to come. Get involved and Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. The show will return in less than a minute. Access Tech Live will be back in 30 seconds.
And we're back on Access Tech Live, getting the answers to our question of the day. If you could teleport to any fictional tech-inspired world like The Matrix, Star Trek, or Wakanda, am I the only person that thinks Wakanda is the place that Eddie Murphy came from in Coming to America?
You just don't pay attention to Marvel movies, Stephen. That's the problem. Is that
no, clearly
you're just not cultured like the rest of us. Okay, so Ben wrote in.
I'm not going to even try and argue that point. You're 100% correct.
That.
Never seen a Star Trek.
It's not Star Trek. It's, oh my God. Okay, so Ben wrote, definitely not The Matrix. Oof. I guess he's a little bit too enthralled with that movie. Mark Francois writes, Mordor, make some barbecue chicken at the volcano. Okay, we can do some Lord of the Rings there. Winnie writes us, The Magical Land of Fantastica from the Never-Ending Story. You ever see that movie, Stephen?
Yeah,
oh,
that's
that
what
you
I
remember?
know. Yeah.
Wow. I don't think that's tech inspired though, so we're gonna have to figure out what the angle is on that. The next one is the perfect one, I think, that we're all thinking, which is Wendy writes Orbit City from the Jetsons. I mean, Michael mentioned that top. Where is Rosie, my house cleaning robot? I'm still waiting for that. Maybe we can make a call to the Boston Dynamics people and see if they're gonna get on that. We've seen the robot dog and the robot person, but nobody cleaning my house. I don't get it. I know you have one, Stephen. We'll get to that in a second. But Shell writes Blade Runner 2049. Not because I'd want to live in a dystopian world marked by decay, environmental degradation, and social inequality, but because I wouldn't mind running into replicants that look like Ryan Gosling. Of course, it has to be.
Yes,
some kind of element there. What world would you want to be in?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, right? So I don't know how good this is as an answer. It's certainly tech-inspired to an extent. The Martian. I'd like to be the guy in The Martian. I can't remember. The guy who's the guy in The Martian. Basically, I want to be on a planet by myself. Is that possible?
That kind of goes back to our question from last week, which is on a deserted island. But you'd rather be just on a planet by yourself.
I want a planet on my own. No, we'll do the show, right? But that's fine. We'll connect up, do the show. But I'll be on a planet by myself, and I'll figure out how to grow vegetables.
There's cameras and everything else there that you need, I'm sure. Oh my Lord! I've been putting some thought to this, and I wish there was one place, but I kind of want a combination of it all, right? Like I love the fantasy of the Matrix, that's fun. I do like Orbit City. I do like Michael's answer about Star Trek being that kind of like this world where everything's perfect. Make whatever food you want. The doors open. That transporter thing I can get over. I think I can deal with being transported places because I would want a transporter now. Like if I could go to the beach in a heartbeat when we're done this. Can you imagine that? That'd be absolutely amazing. Anyhow,
c'est la vie, as way too much thought.
I know a little bit too much. Thank you for pushing through. I know you're not feeling so well, so you can go to bed in roughly 30 seconds. Thank you, of course, to Michael Hainsworth for joining us this week and breaking down. I learned a lot from that interview, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Lots of fun stuff on the road for us on Access Tech Live. So make sure you're following us on all our social media at Access Tech Live so you can keep in touch with us. Especially subscribe on that YouTube channel so you can watch the live stream and all the fun videos that we do. On behalf of Michael Hainsworth and Stephen Scott, I am Mark Aflalo. Thank you for being with us this week and every week on Access Tech Live. See you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Access Tech Live. Follow us online on all social media at Access Tech Live. Email us feedback@accesstechlive.com. Hosted by Stephen Scott in Glasgow and Mark Aflalo in Montreal. Written by Stephen Scott and Mark Aflalo. Producer, Mark Aflalo. Live show director, Anastasia Spalding-Stenhouse. Technical director, Caitlin Robinson. Audio, Jordan Mulgrave. Live graphics and playback, James Kennedy. Graphics coordinator, Eliza Rocco. Integrated described video specialist, M. Williams. Supervising producer, Michelle Dudas. Produced in collaboration with Aflalo Communications Inc. and Double Tap Productions. Copyright 2024. Accessible Media Inc.
An AMI original production.